I make no apologies to be a fervent patriotic Australian.
Yay!
This gentleman here, the last gentleman we spoke about, he spoke about Trans-Pacific Partnership and the demise of Australia. What I speak about is what I've witnessed and seen. I was educated by the former Governor-General, the Governor of the state, Sir William McKell, Ben Chifley's secretary, a man that was Bob Menzies' speechwriter and reported on every trial at Nuremberg. I've been doing this since I left school in 1953. Now, the demise of the country comes down to four things: taxes, tariffs, treaties, and the Family Law Court. Now, you think we've signed all these agreements with the United Nations. You see this volume of stuff here? That's some of the agreements we've signed. There's more than 7,000 there. There's the GATS, all the treaties we've signed with the United Nations. What happened in this country? We're the richest country in the world. We've got 75 of the 77 minerals the world requires, and we have them in abundance. We're awash with oil, coal and gas. There's nothing in the world that we can't produce here, and there's nothing in the world that we can't make here. We're the only country in the world that can produce rural produce 365 days of the year, of every variety, every variation and every quantity. No other country can do it because they're controlled by their geographical constraints. And we've got the greatest farmers, the greatest innovators and the greatest achievers. We signed three things in 1975, besides all that stuff I've just shown you: the world parity pricing of oil, the Family Law Court, Slaughterhouse of the Nation, and the Lima Declaration. Any of you know about the Lima Declaration?
Yep. No.
I'll just give you a little bit of an insight. I'll put my spectaculars on. All countries didn't sign this. America, Belgium, Germany, France, England, the Middle East, China, to France, to name a few. This is Article 27. That Australia facilitate the expansion and diversification of imports from developing countries. When you do that, you finish our manufacturing. Article 28. That Australia ensures developing countries, that's third world countries, share of the trade increases by more than 350% by the year 2000. Article 35. That Australia transfer technical and financial resources as well as capital goods to accelerate the industrialisation of underdeveloped countries.
Oh, that looks like almost stupidissimus.
Yeah, we've done well.
They've done well. We haven't finished yet. We haven't started yet.
That's Anglo-Celtic for you.
That's it. That Australia assist in the development of new economic international order. Now, we claim that the United Nations is the policeman of the world and the goody-goodies, don't we? And they're going to rectify everything. So you would think the man that's head of the United Nations would be a chosen man, powerful, to do this job, wouldn't you? The Under-Secretary-General, under the Charter of the United Nations, and any United Nations peace force, that we would be under the command of the Under-Secretary-General for Political, Social and Council Affairs. This person has control of all United Nations military implements, including nuclear weapons that we supply to the United Nations. So that man would have to be a very chosen, trusted person, wouldn't he, to have that? Would you think that, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, that's right.
So we would think, now, he's a great man to have on our side, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Since 1946, when it was started, here's the list of these gentlemen that held it. Arkadiev Shovlov, Russia. Konstantin Zinchenko, Russia. Ilyov Chesnov, Russia. Dragolev Petrovich, Russia. George Akerview, Russia. E.D. Kislev, Russia. Alex Nekinchenko, Russia. I can keep going. Until the Berlin Wall fell down, they were the men. And you can remember when we had all the... You wasn't allowed into Russia. Not allowed to take a photo, boom, they'd shoot you. The wall's there, you're not allowed in. And yet on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald and all the papers you'd see the the Red Square demonstration with all their rockets. Well, half of them are wooden replicas. And that's what the world, the United Nations wants you to do. You control people with fear and hunger. What you spoke about, you're implicitly correct. The other gentleman, you're implicitly correct. Now, we had everything in this country here. In 1908, the start of the wealth of this country was started by a man called O'Connor. Doesn't ring a bell with any of us. He put a pipeline from Perth to Kalgoorlie that started off the mining boom in this country. No machinery, no money. It took the full Western Australian budget to do it. No machinery, no money. Uphill, pumped them up with steam pumps. 1908, we started with the Commonwealth Bank. Dennis O'Neill and King O'Malley. It was started with 3% for first home buyers, 3% for infrastructure, 3% for farmers. Set. And they've done everything. That was our Reserve Bank. Now, under the Commonwealth Bank Reserve Bank powers, we did some of the greatest achievements in the world that can never be emulated. The Transcontinental Railway across Australia, the longest, straightest railway in the world. We financed the First World War effort, Second World War effort.
What was the interest rate?
Big one?
What was the interest rate?
5/8 of 1%.
Oh.
Don't take me on, because I'll tell you something. Anyone who wants to take it, I've got a very caustic tongue. And I love chewing people to pieces. I love betting people and winning money off them. The Snowy Mountain scheme can never ever be emulated. We started under the Labor Party. We also owned the Holden motor car. It was financed by £1 million for the Commonwealth Bank, £500,000 for the Bank of Adelaide and Bank of New South Wales. First 4 Holden motor cars were made in America. An Australian design. The Yankees had nothing to do with it, but it was done under the Lend-Lease Corporation from the war, because we assembled stuff at Holden Brothers and General Motors down in South Australia and Victoria here. They come out on a ship called the Wanganella. I can tell you all the history, I know all about that, but I don't want to go into every detail. Then they were driven under a Clacker secretary to Melbourne. They didn't want anything to do with Australia because they said we're a socialist country. We own the electricity, the transport, the education, hospitals, everything else. And it's a stupid bloody idea, this Holden car. It hasn't got a V8, it hasn't got a chassis, and it's crazy. Australian inventors revolutionised the automotive industry of the world. It's called a unitary construction. The whole car is part of the strength of the car. They didn't want anything to do with it. But in 1952, this is when the Tax Act started. In 1952, when we sold 22,000, they said, we're not going to put any more money into this. And Menzies went along with them. Now, Menzies was a traitor to the country because he resigned his post in the First World War so he wouldn't get called up. They said, we're not going to put any more money in it. We want it. And they're paying tax, see? At that same period of time, we're doing the Snowy Mountain scheme. And all the engineering companies from America and England were here. And they didn't want to pay tax neither. So we passed the Tax Act of 1953, where if you're manufacturing, investing or conducting business in this country, you need not pay tax here, but tax in the country of your origin. In 1996, the then Commissioner of Taxation, Mr. Jim Kalali, stated that multinationals, I've got the document here, stated that multinationals have paid no tax or little tax since 1953. In 1961, John Cotton told Bob Menzies, if we don't start taxing these countries, we'll bankrupt the country. And that's the problem we've got today. We've destroyed our manufacturing, we've destroyed our farming, and we're destroying the culture. When I said taxes, tariffs, treason, the family law court, the slaughterhouse of the nation, and the religious, no religious Catholic, I'm a Catholic, went to Catholic school so I can speak with alacrity about it, and they all aspire to the 10 Commandments. Well, there's 3 commandments, there's 4 commandments in there that completely obliterate what they're doing with the family law court. Why is crime and corruption and everything else accelerated? Because of that. Now we're talking about the loss of farmers and the loss of our industries. I'll just give you a couple of little instances. 1841, I'll tell you some of the things we've invented in this country. The postage stamp. Hugh Victor Mackay in 1841, the grain stripper. We owned that. Bob Menzies gave that, there was a Sunshine Harvester. Bob Menzies gave that to America, the patent. And in 1841, There's a member of this gentleman's family in the audience. A man called William Braithwaite Clark found all the coal from the Victorian border right up the coast, out to Sofala, everything else. All the coal and gold in 1841. Clark Island in Harbour's named after him. It's not that they've just found it. By the way, with this fracking business, they're decreasing the value of our country with the fracking because there's in excess of 100 byproducts from coal. When you frack it, can't get any more. The purest diesel oil in the world is in Gippsland, Victoria with the brown coal. Purest in the world. There's more brown coal off Botany Bay heads than the world can use till the end of time. We've got $22 trillion worth of shale oil in one strike in South Australia. You can see it there. This coal seam that's up here, just out, not far from here, a place called Glen Davis, just out of Lithgow. Runs from there to the Gulf of Carpentaria. That shale oil there supplied all our military implement, our military complement, and our domestic requirements during the war. It was Commonwealth Oil Refinery, COR. The two pumps that you'd get were COR and Purpool. Bob Menzies dispatched said, not profitable. Why wasn't it profitable? Because there's a place just outside of Mittagong called Joadja that all the Scottish people come out in the 1800s. And they used the kerosene from that to supply all the lamps in Sydney. You had to pull the train out with a winch at the top of the mountain. That was the 1800s. Now we're going to the 1940s. They transferred the retorts from there up to Glen Davis to supply all the military complement. Never modernised it. There's that much shale oil here, we can be an oil exporter instead of an oil importer. But do you think that'll set the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and the oligarchies of the world that's pulling the strings, that our politicians are the puppets to? They couldn't run a bath. Fair dinkum, they couldn't run a bath. There's Joe Hockey, supposed to be the messiah of the bank, Goldman Sachs and everything else, said on TV just recently, 2 weeks ago, you can't expect governments to fix all this. Well, hello, Joe. It's you, the politicians, that inflicted all these things upon us that's got us into this state we're in. But they're not frightened of grease their own pockets, and the fat cat's down there. There's a bloke running Telstra, not Telstra, the Australia Post, earning $5 million a year, and we're losing dough on it. And we've got farmers, wait till I tell you, we've got farmers going out of business. We've got farmers going out of business because of all the things we've done. I'll give you some figures. At the turn of the century, 60% of the people lived in regional areas. 28% live there now. Now I told you about the Lima Declaration, what we've done and how we've wrecked our place. In 1966, we lost 60% of our farmers due to this Lima Declaration. Now we've got disease with the bananas in Queensland now, and the Australian inventors did the rust in wheat, transformed everything around the world. We've just perfected another strain of barley. You wouldn't know about this, they keep all this quiet, that enabled the Tasmanian whisky growers to win the first and second world whisky competition from Tasmania. None of you have ever heard of it. That's what they can do in this country. We've invented this Owen machine gun. The bloke was in jail when he did it. Worked underwater. Saved the fellas up the Kokoda Trail in New Guinea. And they tell us we can't do it today. There's what we did with the Snowy Mountain scheme. No one can emulate it. It's the hardest concrete in the world. And I was privileged enough to meet Sir William Hudson numerous times. And that's what makes Australia a world leader in concrete and highway engineering. The Opera House couldn't have been built without it, because all the information they derived from that, they transformed it there. All these pre-stressed concrete stuff you see there, they stretch concrete. They pull the cables in and stretch it out and then let it go. And it would hold itself on an axis of, if it was a 2-inch bar, hold itself on, I think, about 12 feet without it to bend. This is all the ingenuity we've got. I just told you about the rust, the wheat and everything else. And this Owen machine gun. There's no one can produce the amount of rural produce, cattle. There's a merino, I'll go from subject to subject because my brain goes like a machine gun.
Sorry, what is the Lima Declaration? I'm trying to understand.
The Lima Declaration was to destroy our manufacturing and give it to all third world countries under the disguise that we're going to stop communism and poverty. But that was a load of crap, because all the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund will go to an impoverished country. So Japan will, I'll tell you something.
So you mean that the government of Peru,
No, the United Nations, we signed it in Lima, Peru. It's the United Nations Industry Development Organisation. It's the UNIDO agreement, affectionately termed the Lima Declaration, because it was signed in Lima, Peru. The same place they're going to sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership and everything else. That's why it was called the Lima Declaration, because it was signed in Lima, Peru, but it's the UNIDO, the United Nations Industry Development Organisation. It's all here in these books here I've got here.
Right.
Now,
Read it in there.
big one? The Lima Declaration. Now here's what happened. These are figures from 1960 to 2004. In 1960 we had 50,000 pork farmers. 2004 we had 3,500. We had 70,000 dairy farmers, down to 11,000. 52,000 sheep farmers, down to 14,000. We were once the 7th largest sugar producer in the world, and we brought in with the free trade arrangement you spoke about, and the MIA and everything else, Argentina, Mauritius and Brazil, because they're downtrodden. But they didn't tell you that the oligarchies, the International Monetary Fund, all the corrupt banksters of the world, the banksters, every time you go to anywhere, they've got their banker in your pocket or the government. They wanted to lift their standard of living. So when they raped them of their money, they said, "Good, we've got the money there. Now we'll go somewhere else and have a lash." Now I'll give you a classical example on Australia. South Korea was a basket case after the Korean War. Now they're the world leader in shipbuilding, fast trade, tunnelling. The shipbuilding, 60% of the expertise comes from Australia, and 60% of the raw material. Now you know the size of the Pasha Bulk, we can relate that went up on the North Cape. That boat gets built in 9 weeks, and the minimum wage is 50 grand, paid in US dollars. Australian workers are getting 180 to 220,000 a year over there. Now we transfer. They say we can't pay them the money. And we can't compete with these other countries because of the wages. Well, let's drop our wages down to their level and see what the bank's like about that, because the housing, the arse will fall out of the housing. I don't need that. I can talk without that. I can talk underwater with a mouthful of concrete.
Pretty stressed too.
And we'll drop our wages down so we can compete. But then the bank said, "Hey, don't do that, for Christ's sake! Don't do that! Don't do that, because we can't make any money out of you." Now, you spoke about the young children can't get homes.
Yeah.
I've got it here. I've got that much stuff here.
Well, this Homo stupidissimus is everywhere.
What?
Homo stupidissimus is everywhere.
Now, what happens? It's all about a one world government and new world order.
That's right.
Now, unless you start to think about it, now this is George Bush's speech to US Congress on the 9th of the 11th, 1990. See the relevance of the numbers, 9/11, 1990, 11th of the 9th, 2000. George Bush. We stand at this unique and extraordinary moment. This crisis in the Persian Gulf, as grave as it is, also offers us a rare opportunity to move towards an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our objective is a new world order. So we send all our troops in, get them slaughtered, and then under the disguise of the United Nations and under the disguise of the Russians that held the joint there, we're going to brainwash people and say, "We're the goody-goodies, just follow us so as we can take all your money off you." Then we signed Agenda 21. That was one thing I wish you'd have spoke about. Agenda 21, which means eradication of all private landowners. Next you'll have smart meters on your electricity, then they'll be telling you when you can turn your electricity on and when you can turn it off. Now if we've got sensible government, we've sold our gold, and you need gold, platinum and silver for all the communication stuff computers and everything else. So we sell, Costello said, I've got to sell out of debt. Well, that's all right, you've got to sell everything up, but what are you going to sell next? Does Jerry Harvey sell part of his business that's going good? Does Dick Smith sell part of his that's going good? Does anyone else put that? Sutton's Motors, he started with nothing. Does he sell something? No. Now we're going to sell the poles and wires. We're going to sell them for $1.5 billion. Does anyone know how much money you can borrow to incur an interest debt of $1.5 billion? At 4% you can borrow $200 billion and incur a debt of that. And you can borrow money cheaper than that, governments can. So instead of having 50 billion, what they're talking about, we're going to have 200 billion and we can build infrastructure. There's one way to reduce poverty and friction and trouble and strife, is give people electricity and water and make them self-sufficient. Now, as Abraham Lincoln said, when we signed the Lima Declaration, we're going to uplift the standard of these third world countries. Now, Abraham Lincoln was one of the greatest advocates against poverty, discrimination and deprivation. And his famous quotation is, you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. And when they start all this tax business up, as Karl Marx said, taxation is a political tool to suppress and control a country.
Yep.
And Winston Churchill said, and other leaders, you cannot tax a country into prosperity. It's impossible.
Can we just pause there, John, while I change this, please?
Yeah, do whatever you like.
Yeah, just hold.